Hello and welcome to the next video in this series on health, disease and medicine. What we're going to be briefly talking about in this video is we're going to be talking about communicable diseases, what they are, what we mean by a host and how can they be transferred. We're sort of going to look at surface detail just to get an idea of what they are. Now, at the time of me making this video, communicable disease is dominating our lives, and that's COVID-19. It's an example of one of these kinds of diseases. So the big difference between a communicable disease and a non-communicable disease is that these can be transferred between individuals. Now, with diseases, there's diseases that are specific to species, there's sort of wider diseases. With the cases of what you need to know at GCSE, the diseases that we look at are sort of human diseases. So we've got this concept that can be transferred between individuals. Now, what causes these diseases? Well, in most of these cases, what it's going to be caused by is it's going to be caused by things such as viruses, bacteria, and potentially in some cases, single-celled organisms. Now, all of these can be brought under one banner. Now, that is the word pathogen. Now, a pathogen, okay, is a disease-causing microorganism. Okay, but we've got this idea that these diseases are caused by pathogens, which are disease-causing microorganisms. Now, any infected individual, okay, is known as a host. So if you're infected with the disease or with the pathogen, you are known as a host. Okay, so we've got another word. Okay, so a host. Okay, they are an infected individual. So that individual is obviously also an organism, okay, but we've got this concept of having that host. So we've got pathogens that live in hosts. Now, the last thing that we've really got to talk about here is how they're actually transferred. Because one of the interesting things about pathogens is that pathogens are pretty rubbish, usually, at existing outside their host. There are some that are pretty good at it, and some that last longer than others. But to all intents and purposes, they're not very good at just sort of magically going from one person, sort of like in their own existence, going in somebody else. They need help getting there. So we have different ways in which these organisms can be transferred. So let's have a little think about how they can be transferred. So when we're thinking about the transfer of diseases and these pathogens, the one that probably everybody's aware of at the moment, as I said, time of making this video, COVID-19 is in the news. We're all talking about washing our hands, making sure we're nice and clean, making sure that we're potentially covering our faces in areas where we can't social distance. Now, the reason for that is because the way in which COVID-19 is transferred between organisms is through droplets. Now, those droplets can then infect other people by getting into what we call the oral passages. So things like nose, eyes, into your mouth, okay, any of those are sort of areas in which they're sort of susceptible to droplets getting into your body, okay, and that's one way the pathogen can get in. Some communicable diseases can be transferred by bodily fluids. So what I mean by bodily fluids is this is certainly one way in which sexually transmitted diseases are transferred between each other. Okay, so the transfer of bodily fluids. Other things could be blood, so infected blood can infect somebody else. And sort of another way that these pathogens can get from one person to another is actually being transferred by another organism. So an example of that would be malaria. So malaria is caused by single-celled organisms, and that is transferred between people by mosquitoes. Searching for the word there. Now, when an organism is transferring a disease from one individual to another, they are known as a vector. Okay, so let's have a little look in summary of what we've got. We've got communicable diseases. Okay, communicable diseases can be transferred between individuals. Okay, so there is the potential that if you have a communicable disease, you can give it to somebody else. We've also got this word here, pathogen. Okay, a pathogen is a disease-causing microorganism. We've also got this host here. Okay, we've got the idea that a host is an infected individual. We've then got some key ways in which communicable diseases can be transferred. So we've got droplets. We've got this idea of oral, okay, which, as I said, is sort of passages into the body. So we've got eyes, nose, mouth. Okay, those are sort of the ways that they can get in. And then we've got by another organism, which is our vector. Okay, so that was sort of like a quick little introduction to communicable diseases. I'm going to talk in more detail in a future video about pathogens, what they are, the differences in viruses, bacteria, talk about a few different examples as well. And we're also going to talk about how the body actually defends from some of these things and talk about barriers and such. Okay, but this is just a general intro video into some of the key words. So, thank you very much for watching. Please, if you enjoyed the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It would be awesome to have your support. But in the next video, we're going to be talking a little bit about an example of a non-communicable disease, which is cardiovascular disease. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next video.